Philippe is still joining me, and I know you've met my next guest, who is the son of a man who really should have been the major topic of debate and conversation when our Prime Minister Keir met with Xi Jinping, the President of China, overnight. It was, we're told, an 80-minute meeting. Well, aren't we very, very lucky that it was? It was only expected to last 40 minutes, but that's an awfully long way to go, isn't it, to just get an 80-minute meeting with the President of China, and as far as we can tell, other than some visa-free travel for up to 30 days for British people travelling to China, pretty much we've got nothing else in return. Prime Minister says he did raise human rights concerns with the Chinese president, but we don't know how detailed that conversation was. Unlikely to be very detailed. Well, let's talk right now to Sebastien Lai, who is the son of Jimmy Lai, who is being held by the Chinese on charges of being, well, a pro-democracy activist, numerous other trumped-up charges, and faces life behind bars. Good afternoon to you, Sebastien.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. There'll be a lot of people who don't know much about your dad, who born in China, became a very successful businessman in Hong Kong, very, very staunch, very prominent pro-democracy activist, about what has happened to him, what he's charged with, and what his life is like right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So, as you alluded to, he arrived as a child refugee, escaping communist China to then British Hong Kong. He was 12. You know, he had nothing, but as he always would tell me, that it was one of the best days of his life, because even though he had nothing, he knew that in British Hong Kong he had freedom. And he became tremendously successful in business, founding a clothing brand called Giordano, which is a kind of a precursor to Uniqlo. Then the Tiananmen Square massacre happened of '89, and he knew that he had to do something to defend the freedoms that gave him so much. So he started a newspaper on the back of that called Apple Daily, with the belief that with information people had choice, and with choice people had freedom.
And this was all within the context, wasn't it, that they were looking at within the next decade, Hong Kong being handed back to the Chinese? Exactly.
So everybody started auto-censoring before the handover, and my father knew that that's why it was so important to have a media group that didn't do that wasn't afraid to criticize the powerful, the tycoons, the triads and whatnot. And obviously that got him in all kinds of trouble. I still remember our house being firebombed. There was an occasion actually when in Taiwan when a dog was skinned and pinned out our door. But
goodness.
It's absolutely horrible. But throughout it all, my father and his journalists courageously printed the day's news every single day, and the people of Hong Kong had a choice at the newsstand to have a voice that wasn't spoke truth to power, wasn't cowed. Yeah. And then 2020, the national security law was passed, which essentially meant that Hong Kong no longer had the rule of law. They had a mechanism to go above of rule of law, and my father knew that he was going to be one of the main targets. Many people told him to leave,
and he could have. It's an interesting thing. He's a very wealthy man.
Yeah,
he was already by then your family British citizen. He could have left. He could have found safety and carried on living a very nice, easy life in the West.
Yeah, there are actually many occasions in Dad's life where he could have chosen the comfortable route, the wrong route, I think, but the comfortable one, where he'd be much wealthier, much more comfortable somewhere else instead of in a Hong Kong maximum security prison. But look, he would always say Hong Kong is so poor, the only thing they have is money. Right? He knew the importance of freedom. And for him, he knew that by leaving, not only is he leaving his principles behind, but more importantly, he'd be leaving his people behind. Mm-hmm. And by staying, he knew that he could act as a lightning rod for the persecution to come. Yeah. So as he says himself, in an interview right before he was arrested, he's like, look, if I leave, I live comfortably, but if I stay, I live meaningfully.
Yeah, very powerful words. I mean, he's been in and out of prison, numerous different charges. In December, he's been in prison since 2021.
2020, actually.
2020. Yeah. I know they kept hoping he was going to get some sort of bail. Different charges brought. He was convicted. The latest conviction in let's face it, not a meaningful court process as we would understand it in the West. And his latest charges, this is sedition, and this is working with foreign forces as well.
And yeah, collusion. With foreign forces. Look, this is a trial that has internationally been, there's international outcry. There's allegations of one of the witnesses being tortured. Obviously, there's no jury. There's 3 national security law judges. And all they found throughout this whole trial, this allegation of colluding with foreign forces. Well, collusion suggests some nefarious benefit. Well, all they found after 5 years of rotting through his stuff, of treating him, essentially torturing him, they found that this nefarious benefit was democracy in Hong Kong. Big reveal.
Yes. Yeah, but also he was meeting with politicians openly. It was being publicised. Yes. It wasn't. He was very clear about his views. But he's yet to be sentenced. But the sentence will be life behind bars. And even though we've got, the UK government, the European Parliament, I know senior figures in the American administration have spoken out, that is where he remains. Tell us what his health is like, because there's been a lot of concern. He's now 78 years old, and my goodness me, he's got the heart of a lion, but he has the body of a 78-year-old man. And how bad is the treatment he's getting in this Chinese prison?
It's heartbreaking. I mean, you mentioned life imprisonment, but even if he gets 5 years, that's basically the same. It's a death sentence. He's being kept in what is essentially a concrete box, 60 square feet. He doesn't get natural light. He's in solitary confinement, so he's 14 days of solitary confinement is prolonged solitary confinement. He's been there for 1,800 days. I think everybody remembers, COVID, for example, when you you were in your own little room, and that's in your own home, right? So it's torture. There's no other word for it. And he went in. He already had diabetes, but now because of the conditions he's being kept in, he now has heart issues. I think everybody knows someone of his age, and if you put someone like that in this little concrete box, and summers it goes up to 30, 40 degrees. Look, the chances of survival are extremely slim.
I mean, I know I've been reading, talking about he's got rotting teeth, his fingernails falling off. He's barely allowed outside for exercise, not even a full hour. When he does get outside, I mean, these are deliberately harsh conditions. The Chinese know what they're doing, and a lot of this is about basically a statement to the people of Hong Kong. Look what we can do to the very rich, powerful man that you've all heard of, and we get away with it. So, do you want to try your hand too? This is about a warning to others as well as a punishment to him. What do you make then of people quite literally kowtowing to the Chinese president? Xi Jinping agreed to meet our Prime Minister, who travelled all the way to China for, an amazing 80 minutes. We're told, these issues have been raised, but in what way? We've given in, you can have your Chinese embassy at a crucially, security-wise, crucial part of central London, overseeing, basically next to these crucial communication cables for our city, basically agreeing to pretty much anything in return for cheap imports, and now visa-free travel for British nationals, business or tourism to the country. What do you make of foreign leaders like ours going along, bending the knee to the man who's imprisoned your father?
Look, as you alluded to, my father is in jail for his courage. That's the price of courage in Hong Kong, the price of standing up for freedom. But if my father can do it, if someone, an individual can do it, then so can a country and its prime minister, his country. And his prime minister, and I think there is a lot of worries around our relationship with China, national security, and I think for many people in the UK, it feels like we've given so much. You mentioned the embassy, this visit as well, and I think most people don't really see what we have received in return. Yes. If we're talking about a relationship, it's not one way; it's two ways, right? And it would take. If we've given so much, the least they could do is put a 78-year-old man who is at very high risk of dying at any point on a plane back home here to London. This isn't a massive ask from our part.
But there's no reason for there's no reason for Xi Jinping to agree to that, because he knows we're not going to kick up a fuss. What do you make of this idea that in the West, and again, this was happening under David Cameron and even before then, this idea that we need to do more trade with China will open up communications, and like what we had with Russia and Eastern Europe, the glasnost and perestroika, that this will open up the country and they'll join the West, because why wouldn't you want to do that? How seriously should we take that as a policy when, as we know, Xi Jinping only the last week has basically managed to deal with his one remaining possible challenger, a childhood friend who's a senior military, senior general in the army, basically say, like, I am now the supreme ruler, absolute for life of this country. So is trade going to be the way we oust this guy?
Well, look, I think whatever. Look, obviously China's the second biggest economy. I'm not here to say that we shouldn't trade with them, right? But I think Lord Patton was the one who said, look, China trades the same way as everybody trades, right? It's out of self-interest. Yeah. That's as simple as that. That's the math, right? So this idea that we would trade our freedom, our citizens, our human rights, for any perceived economical benefit is not only wrong, it's also completely illogical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this idea of warming relationships, if they can't even do something so human, so right, and so rational, actually, because there's direct impact to China's reputation and to Hong Kong's economy, keeping my father in there. Yeah. Then what can we? What can we expect from that relationship?
But also, crucially, he is a British citizen. He's a British citizen, and in terms of how much the government, how much the Foreign Office, how much contact they've had with him, they've had with you as family members. How involved are they, or do they just sort of say the right things, do the right things, and don't make any effort? Don't make a fuss because it'll create bad relations. Or are they behind the scenes taking action that we don't often hear about?
I think there's, at least the ones that I've met, there's a lot of people in the Foreign Office that are, that wants to see this happen, right? I think a lot of people, on a personal level, are incredibly moved about my father's story. In the end of the day, I think it's heroic, right? What he's done, and I think a lot of people don't want to see someone like him die in prison. I think in the end of the day, it's about putting conditionalities. Yeah. It's saying, look, if you want warming of relationships with the United Kingdom, then the least you could do is send him over. And to your point, he's a British citizen. He's only a British citizen. He has no other nationality. In fact, the United Kingdom was the first state to recognise him as a human, because he went to Hong Kong without papers, and the first time any state recognised him was the United Kingdom. And he's sacrificed a lot of his life, much of his wealth, to further these freedoms, to uphold this promise in the joint declaration between United Kingdom and China. So I think if you're going to give anybody a citizenship, isn't that the best possible outcome in some sense? Yeah,
right? Quite a lot better than a lot of the people we have been giving citizenship to. Sebastien, I can't thank you enough for talking to us. Really appreciate your time. Your father is an absolute lion. It's extraordinary, and I really hope we do better by him and your family, because it's a source of national shame that we don't. That's Sebastien Lai, son of Jimmy Lai, basically still being held behind bars and facing a life sentence and dying behind bars if we don't, force China into action. Philip Ingram, listening to all of that, incredibly impressive young man himself, is Sebastien. But I mean, what Jimmy Lai has done, and again, he's not a household name in the UK, we know that, but he's incredibly famous in Hong Kong. And again, you've got to really admire people. He put his money where his mouth is. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. We need more people like that. And pushing for democracy. I don't think we should ever give Hong Kong back to the Chinese. I thought that was insane. And we've lived to rue the day. We know what China is. They told us who they were. They showed us who they were, and then they acted who they were. Kowtowing to this man in Beijing when he's holding a British citizen in conditions like that for the crime of being pro-democracy and freedom, that's a national embarrassment.
It's more than that. Not only China are sticking effectively two fingers up at us. They signed an international agreement where they weren't going to change the one country, two regimes rule whenever they took over Hong Kong. They did.
Yeah.
And we have done nothing about it.
Well, we can't do anything about it would be the answer to
well,
that.
no, we can. There's quite a
We're
lot
not
that
going to seize Hong Kong back,
No. Yeah, action doesn't necessarily mean military action and all the rest of it. There's an awful lot of Chinese come into universities, come into the UK and visitors and all the rest of it. A very simple action would be, until Jimmy Lai is released, we will give no more visas for anyone to come and study in the UK.
None of your
Full
students.
Stop. Go away.
Tell you what would be a bonus for
and
that.
Start throwing them out.
And you can't fund our universities either. Stop
Exactly.
buying them up. Here's another thing. Wouldn't that be great? Because all of our young people who get 3 grade A levels in science subjects will be able to get training as medical students,
exactly.
which they're currently not able to. Just to let you know, the Prime Minister, the Downing Street, has issued a statement saying, we said Keir Starmer had a substantive conversation about the issue of human rights abuses during his meeting with Xi Jinping. He told journalists already that he raised the issue of Jimmy Lai. It's now understood this wasn't a fleeting moment, but a substantive discussion which the Chinese leadership engaged with proportionately. But I'm sorry, but apparently this is the reason why the meeting. You had a 40-minute meeting that ended up being an 80-minute meeting, and you think you had a substantive conversation. I mean, we just talked about Jimmy Lai, just some of the basics there. That was 15 minutes.
Yeah, and
You're telling me there's rubbish.
We've only just scratched the surface of it.
Yeah, what a load of abject nonsense. It's embarrassment, it really is. 12:20 is the time. Your thoughts on everything we're talking about, whatever you want to talk about, at home, abroad, Keir Starmer, and everything he's doing. I've had it with him. I'm done with it. I mean, I was never a fan. Again,
but it gets worse and worse.
I've said it before, and I've said it so many times, and I'm really sorry to keep repeating this. I knew he would be bad. I didn't in a million moments think that he would be this bad a Prime Minister, but yes, he keeps sinking to new lows. 12:21 is the time. Give us a call to have your say. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to get in touch, in particular about Keir Starmer apparently defending cozying up to China on this trip, despite the fact we've just spoken to the son of a man who we should be defending. By the way, stop worrying about getting this El Fattah bloke out of the Egyptian prison, which apparently was the #1 priority of the Foreign Office. He's an Egyptian guy who claimed, I don't know how he was given British citizenship. This guy is a British citizen. End of. Get him out of prison. This